here's what we want the sound of our church to be. Like, there's a target, because unless you have a target, there's no way to celebrate it when you hit it, and there's no way to evaluate it when you don't.
Yeah, that virtual soundcheck thing, I think, is a huge missing piece that a lot of people just don't think it's worth the dollars and cents for, when it really is.
Oh, I think it's a must. It's the only way to do anything outside of the heat of the moment of a rehearsal or a sound check or a service. We had an analog Mackie console at the time, large format Mackie desk, and it was literally like, hey, let's try to make this thing sound as good as it can.
Kids these days will never understand what it is.
Never understand.
It's a mix on an analog Mackie board. If you're in the AV industry, especially in the house of worship market, and you haven't heard of Jeff, you've probably heard something he's touched, whether it's a concert that you've been to. Honestly, if you've gone to a live Dude Perfect show, you've heard him. We're going to be talking with him some technical things, some golf, his past, how he got into the industry. More than what we normally talk to on an interview, something that we don't really get in this industry is why people are here and how they got here, and how to encourage people to keep pushing and get to a level that they want to be at. I know that Jeff has been a great inspiration for me. I'm super excited about this conversation that I'm about to have with him, and I hope you guys are inspired as well.
It's great.
Yeah, so just
where are you based?
We're in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Grand Rapids. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Have you been here before?
Oh yeah. It's funny. I've not done a lot of work with churches in Grand Rapids, but I feel like every tour that I've ever been on, we've been in the arena.
Yep.
Many times. So it's a great. I mean, I went to school in Ann Arbor, so I'm a U of M grad, and so I love Michigan, but that part of the state,
yeah,
I haven't been too much. But the last time I was in Grand Rapids was with Dude Perfect a couple summers ago. We're actually going to be back there this summer, and I'm mixing front of house for their tour, and Rusty Anderson is our video director. And so Rusty and I play golf together a lot if we're on the road. And there's a place north of Grand Rapids called Pilgrim's Run Golf Club, which is up
7 minutes from my house.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I live in Cedar Springs.
Oh my gosh. Well, there was something about our time there that it was like perfect time of day. Mid-July, perfect weather. It was just like a magical day at Pilgrim's Run, and so I can't wait to get back there this summer. I'm going to be there in July this year as well. So sweet. Can't wait to go back. But yeah, that's the thing about Michigan that a lot of people don't understand. Like, they just think because we're in the north, like, we're super cold, and it's like we do get really cold during the wintertime, but like we're not like Montana and Minnesota cold. Like we can get really, really cold, but man, like, we got snowboarding and all that kind of jazz during the winter. And then during the summertime, our summers are pretty great. Gorgeous. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. And I love, especially that time of year, the sun doesn't go down till 9:30 at night. So you've got really long days, and it's just awesome. Yeah. It's really great until you have little kids and they're like, the sun's still awake. Why do I have to go to sleep? You got to go to sleep 2 hours ago, kid. Yeah. So let's start with just kind of some of your background. You said you're a U of M grad. Kind of tell us who you are, where'd you start, how'd you get in the industry, type of process. Yeah. So some people have heard my story before, but for those of you who haven't, I grew up in the church. My dad was a minister of music. Before they had worship leaders, he was, minister of music, which meant choir director and leading congregational singing with, piano and organ, basically, no band on stage, but it was just real traditional piano and organ. But we always would do like a big Christmas or Easter production with the choir. And so I grew up around music and was involved with, singing with my family and playing music as a kid. You're all through my growing up. So I went to school at University of Michigan for music. I was a trumpet major. Go Blue. Yeah, go Blue. And I was in the School of Music, and I was a performance major. Actually, I was studying trumpet, and it got to about the end of my sophomore, beginning of my junior year, and I realized that there were a lot of people who were friends of mine who were older than me, who could play circles around me, getting out of school, not getting jobs in orchestras because there aren't any. And so it's funny, they don't tell you that when you sign up. They just take your money and say, hey, have fun in the practice room. So for me, I needed to find another area of interest in music where I might be able to make a living someday. So I took a couple of recording classes. Michigan at the time had just started a music production, music technology program. They built a big recording studio. And so I got kind of bitten by the production bug then, and still got my degree in performance, but graduated and moved to Atlanta after college to work in a recording studio. So spent a lot of time in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s in recording studios in Atlanta, helping make albums for people. So I got connected with Integrity Music and produced a series of albums for them called Shout Praises Kids for their sort of children's music department, and worked with my studio buddies in Atlanta producing those projects. And at the same time, North Point Community Church in Atlanta was just getting started. So Andy Stanley's church, for those of you who don't know North Point, it was before the building was built. My wife and I became a part of their kind of young adult ministry, and all of the songs that were the tracks that were created for the kids ministry there and some of the other kind of student-led departments and stuff were produced at the studio where I was working. So I had kind of an inside track into what was happening at North Point through their music, and was a part of helping to produce some of those resources. And through that kind of connection, got to know the people who were involved in programming and producing events that were outside of Sunday morning. So marriage conferences or a kids event or a student camp. And so they would bring me in to mix audio for those events because they knew me from the music in the studio.
Nice.
I didn't know anything about live sound at the time. I was just trying to take what I knew from the studio and take it to a live environment where I thought, okay, this PA is going to be like my near field monitors. How can I make it sound good in the studio? Let's try to transfer some of that to live. So I was really, at that time, I was like 80-20 in my sort of mixing studio versus live. And then through connections at North Point, I got to know some of the folks around Passion conferences. Passion was just getting rolling at that time as well. And so most of the Passion team actually attended North Point as their local church because their offices were nearby. So 2005, I served on the production team for Passion Conference for the first time. This year was actually my 21st year serving with Passion.
Nice.
But in the early years, I wasn't even mixing. I was like the production assistant for one of the breakout rooms where they did a community group. Back in the day, Passion used to have, it was a day longer in terms of the conference, and they had community groups as part of their deal. So I was running Pro Presenter for Nathan and Christy Knuckles one year at a Passion breakout. It's like, not mixing audio at all. And then 2007 was the first year that Passion had the main arena and then kind of an overflow kind of B room in the Georgia World Congress Center. So Phillips Arena at the time was the main room, and then there was the 7,000 seat kind of B space that bands would be live in each location, and then the talk would be piped back and forth depending on where the speaker was originating. So they brought me in to mix the B room, and the music at that time was Chris Tomlin, David Crowder, Charlie Hall, and Matt Redman. And those were the four kind of Passion artists back in the day. So after that, I'd gotten to know some of the bands from that experience. And so after that conference, Chris Tomlin was losing his front house guy. A guy named Mark Thomas was taking a job at the Grand Ole Opry as the in-house monitor engineer. And so Chris asked me to come and take Mark's place. Well, my daughter was 9 months old at the time. I was doing fine in the studio. I was happy with being involved in the church, and I had never set out to be a touring guy. So I said, man, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I'm really not able to come out and do this. He said, well, why don't you come and fill in for some dates that we already have booked until we find somebody to take Mark's place. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. So 9.5 years later, we found a replacement. So,
isn't that how it always goes?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough and had the opportunity to be on the road with Chris Tomlin, mixing front of house for him for really, those kind of glory years of his touring life, which was, from 2007 to 2016. And obviously he's still out doing a bunch of stuff, but those almost 10 years for me were, foundational and formational really for me in terms of how I approach mixing, but then also just seeing the church around the world and being a part of what God is doing through worship, everywhere. So it was, over 800 shows, 30 countries between Chris and Passion, literally all over the world, having an opportunity to see, the best and the worst of church production in some ways, but then just to be encouraged by not only his ministry, but just the power of, what worship music can do, and how me as an engineer can help shape people's experience of worship. And, thinking about how we as the production team can partner with the team on stage to facilitate environments where people are moved to take a step in their faith. That was, it laid the foundation for me just in terms of my philosophy, not only about mixing, but about my role as an engineer, but then also laid the foundation for MXU and the resource that we're trying to provide to church production teams to help, be a part of facilitating those environments in partnership with the worship team to be able to lead people into a growing relationship with God and their faith. So, that it's a long story, but when I look back, I just see God's faithfulness over and over again. And I see, how he was able to position me through relationships and through opportunities to be able to have somewhat of a voice in how to speak into church production in general, but, audio specifically, and just try to help people get better and be better in what they're doing to serve the church.
Yeah. So what point in that time frame did you guys start to think about MXU and kind of get that launched, and what was kind of the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So MXU, it's funny, it was founded by myself and Andrew Stone and Lee Fields, and the three of us had been asked at various times to be involved in, maybe speaking at a roundtable discussion at a NAMM show or a WFX or different conferences. Lee and Andrew were both big, production leaders in their churches. I was on tour. The three of us never really had a chance, though, to kind of learn from each other. And so we were asked to be a part of a panel at Infocom one year. This was 2015. And it was just, we were in a hotel ballroom, the three of us sitting on stools in front of the room. And the guy who was facilitating the conversation said, "Hey, what's the first thing you do when you walk up to a console and build a mix?" And it was like, well, we don't have a console here. There's not a band on stage. I don't have a PA, so I can't really show you anything. So it was kind of like this weird kind of sort of helpful conversation, but it really wasn't.
It's like muscle memory. It's not something I've really thought through.
I can't really talk to you about how to approach the drums because we're not hearing any drums right now. So it was a little frustrating for us because it was like, we had fun talking about stuff, but I'm not sure how helpful it was to the people in the conversation.
Yeah.
So we went to dinner that night and we were kind of commiserating about that experience. And we thought, what we really need is a way for us to be able to learn from each other. I can't just walk up to Church on the Move on a Sunday morning and say, hey, Andrew, can you solo and place your snare drum? Because I'm really curious about what you're doing right now. Because there's people in the room, like we're in the middle of a service. It's just not appropriate. So we said, what if we could just load up some tracks, set up our consoles in a warehouse somewhere and just play back tracks for each other and talk about mixing. So we could unpack effects. We could talk about drums. We could talk about vocals. Like, how do you approach how you listen? Like, how do you craft, a mix from the ground up? Talk to me about your channel strip and all the stuff. So we said, I bet people would want to eavesdrop on that conversation. So January of 2016, we did our first event, and it was, hey, could we get 100 people to come listen to us talk all day about mixing? Like, if we could do that, it would be worth doing. So Saddleback Church in Orange County gave us a room, and each of us brought in consoles through our manufacturer partners that we know and love. And sure enough, we got 100 people to come listen to us yammer all day about how we approach mixing, and it was a big hit. So we did 3 more of those in various places around the country in 2016. Then 2017, we did a few more. And then 2018, we thought, this is cool, but there's really no way to scale this much bigger because we just don't have time to keep doing more and more events. So we should probably figure out how to put some of this content online. And so we recorded our first batch of videos. It was about 75 videos just talking about basics of audio. And we thought maybe we can get people to kind of engage with this platform. And at the time, we were thinking of it as kind of like Netflix for production, right? There's this video library. You can come and pick and choose what you want to watch and try to learn. Well, then we decided that we didn't want to leave our lighting and video friends behind. So we partnered with some friends of ours to make some more content to include video and lighting. And then by 2020 or so, realized that, this needs to be more than just Netflix for production. Like, how can we truly resource a church production team? So, this turned from a little idea about an event into a bit of a hobby, and then more expanded into, okay, this might actually be a real business. So how could we make this subscription more, just more
all around?
More all around, and a deeper, richer experience. So if a production leader could maybe, assign videos to their team and track their progress and figure out even how to schedule people based on their, completion of certain things, and how to work through not just individual videos, but courses, and how can we empower a team lead to be able to actually build a healthy team and sustain them for the long haul. So MXU has become that platform. It's a software tool that is not just training, but we really try to engage production leaders with how to recruit, train, and retain a healthy volunteer team. So we talk, sure, about audio, video, and lighting, but we also talk about leadership and how to have a team night and how to best sort of engage people on the front end with vision and, what your ministry is about in the first place and why serving is important and those kinds of things. So it really is a more holistic, well-rounded approach to building a healthy team. So we're really excited about what's happening with MXU, and we continue to grow. And, it really has become, we hope, the platform for church production teams to not only get better, but to be better and to be more healthy and to be stronger together as a team.
Yeah. I know I've sold a lot of subscriptions for you guys.
Well, we really appreciate it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've seen a lot that's kind of crazy is like how many people in church production don't really know how to cast vision, why they need to have vision, how to build a team, why it's important to have pizza parties, with your team and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, totally. It's been really good to kind of see your guys' offerings expand. I actually did a video on the channel. I don't know if you've seen it. You guys did a gain structure video, the three of you.
Yeah.
And I kind of like did like a breakdown of that, because like that's one of the biggest things that I find is probably one of the biggest foundational issues that people have. And so I was like, I really wanted to hammer this. And I love in that where you ask the question about like, what is gain? And like you and Lee both look at Andrew and Andrew's like, I don't know what it means. And you're like, well, and you like pulled up in your phone.
I had to look up the definition. Yeah. Well, it's so important. Like simple things like gain structure can set the tone for everything. Like whether it's, you know, signal flow for video or gain structure for audio or signal flow for audio, like just those fundamental things set the stage for the quality of everything.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like if gain structure is wrong from an audio perspective, then, you know, console resolution, the way plugins respond, the way effects respond, signal to noise ratio, all these things are so impacted by improper gain structure. And so many new volunteers to a team or people from small churches or whatever the case may be, it's like, man, they lack that fundamental understanding. It's like we've got people who are really willing to serve and have a great heart, but lack some of the technical skill and just basic knowledge. So for us, and it's funny because when we did those very first videos, we thought, okay, this is like 101, like we're going super basic.
Yeah.
And the feedback we got was, man, this is way over our heads. Like, how can we get even more simple? Like, this is a fader. This is what a fader does, you know, and, you know, not just here's how you should mix faders, but it's like, okay, what is sound? Like what is a sound wave and how does it work fundamentally, like from a physics standpoint? Yeah. And to have some of that, you know, core fundamental just understanding is, you know, without those building blocks, it's really, really hard. And then on the team side, you know, similarly, those fundamental building blocks, you know, you talked about vision. It's like, you know, if we don't clarify where we're headed as a team, if we don't clarify what the win is for a Sunday morning, if we don't clarify like
why we're doing what we're
why
doing.
We're doing this, and here's what we want the sound of our church to be, like there's a target, because unless you have a target, there's no way to celebrate it when you hit it, and there's no way to evaluate it when you don't. Yeah, you know, if it's just this nebulous, hey, we just want it to be good, it's like, well, what does that mean? Like what has the pastor decided is the vision for where we're headed? Do we all have an understanding of that? And are we all on the same page with how to best sort of move the ball down the field to make that happen? It's like without those core fundamental components, it's whether it's technical or relational or spiritual or team, like we got to have those building blocks in place or we can't move successfully together.
I've said to clients, or it's like, have you guys ever said to yourself on a Sunday morning, oh, Steve must be mixing, right? Because he does this very specific thing. Maybe it's too loud. The drums are overpowering everything, whatever it may be. Like you walk in the room, you don't see who's at front of house. You just know who's mixing. Yeah. And then that becomes frustrating for you because it's not how the other guy or the other two guys mix or whatever. But then you've never set that foundation and you've never, like you said, that target. And it's like, well, how do you hold someone accountable for something that they've never been told like what that goal is? Yeah. And so it's like, you can't get after someone or correct someone for something that they've not been told how to do it correctly. Yeah. Right.
Or have they ever heard from the worship pastor or the senior pastor or executive pastor or anybody in leadership over them? Have they ever heard from them? Here's how loud we want it to be. Here's what we want our drums to sound like. Here's in terms of mixed priority, here's where we want our vocals to sit. Like, what do we want the sound of our environments to be? Yeah. I think very few people have clear direction on that. And so people are left to kind of guess. And if they're not a professional, if they're just a hobbyist, you know, they own an accounting firm and they come and mix on Sunday mornings. It's like, most people barely understand how the console works, much less how to listen and how to make music, how to partner with the team on stage to make sure that we're, that we know, okay, this song is piano driven. This song is acoustic guitar driven. This song has a hook in between the first chorus and the second verse that the electric guitar is driving the bus, and we need to figure out how to ride that so that people are engaged musically. Like those conversations can rarely happen if we don't have the building blocks of how to create sort of this fundamental good sounding mix in the first place. So again, vision from leadership is so important. And then obviously training to be able to get better at those things so that we can create muscle memory. We can create, a consistent sort of console layout and show file so that no matter who's mixing, whether it's Steve or Jerry or Elizabeth, they walk up to the console on Sunday morning and everything is laid out the same way so that we know what to expect and we can start to anticipate, okay, my vocals are always right at my right hand. And I know that vocal 1, 2, and 3 are lined up on stage right, stage center, stage left, so that they're in order the way that I see them. And then all my drums are on this layer with my left hand, and my keys and tracks are on the second layer with my left hand. Like just simple things like how to establish some of those predictable setups so that we can anticipate and react and, develop. Again, the way we learn things is based on, we want to have this sense of competence and confidence so that anytime we're standing behind the desk, we know what we expect it to do and what we expect our sort of moves, how we expect them to translate in the PA. And the more, audio is such a long game. It's like it takes hundreds, sometimes thousands of reps to get to a point where you're actually highly skilled and excellent at what you do. So because of that, if you only mix a couple times a month, that's years worth of training and just repetition that's required to be able to become truly a master at what you do. So how can we, as leaders, how can we sort of take steps to shorten that path so that it doesn't take quite as long for people to make incremental progress, so that people feel like they can walk away from an event or a service and they're a little bit better than they were last time?
Yeah. So I have a question twofold for you. One is a question about you, but then the other question is based off of that. Who's the biggest influence / mentor that you've had in this industry? And then the question I have is that from a majority of churches, there isn't usually a pro tech person there. Like you said, it's volunteer driven. How do we get these guys to get mentors outside of just watching YouTube videos or, those types of things? Like what's your suggestion to those people so that they can continue to push themselves and get better type thought process?
Man, that's a really good question. So for me, there were a couple people for me in live sound that kind of set the stage for my learning. I think, first of all, we'll go back to the studio days. The owner of the studio at the time is a guy named Randy, and one of the main kind of other engineers and producers at the studio was a guy named John Carrozza. John was a great friend of mine and an incredible musician. So talked to me a lot about just basics about how to think about EQ and compression and, how to listen. And, I think for me, one advantage that I had was that I approached producing and mixing as a musician first rather than as a technician. So I feel like I've always had a pretty good musical sensibility. Mm-hmm. So what to listen for in music and how to really kind of hear music in layers has never, it's always been a strength that I've had. But in terms of just the actual mechanics of the technology, I had people around me in the studio who were able to guide me through, here's what an insert is. Here's how to handle compression. Here's what these ratios mean. And then I had the luxury of time in the studio to be able to really tweak those things to figure out, okay, when I do plus 10 dB at 12K on this sound, here's what that actually sounds like. Or here's what it sounds like when I do a drastic cut at 500 hertz on a tom or something. I could really experiment with the nuances of those things. But then in terms of transferring that to live sound, there was a guy named George Clark, who is actually one of the principals at, used to be Clark Pro Media, now it's just Clark.is, the integrator. He was kind of the audio engineer for North Point, patient zero, like day one. And he showed me a lot of how he was approaching stuff. We had an analog Mackie console at the time, large format Mackie desk. And it was literally like, hey, let's try to make this thing sound as good as it can. It was a Rankis Hines PA. And, before it was a line array and before it was a digital desk, it was...
Kids these days will never understand what it is.
Never understand.
It's a mix on an analog Mackie board.
Yeah. And then we graduated to an analog Soundcraft Series 5, which was a great console, super sounding EQ, great preamps, and then made our way to Meyer line array and on from there. But so I had people around me who were respected, who I could look to and ask questions of, and they didn't approach me like anything I had to say was a dumb question. They were super gracious and really helpful. And so I think for young people today, or people who are new volunteers or guys just starting out, I think to find that person or people who you can just be unashamed to ask questions of. And then for those of us who've been around for a while, to always have somebody around us who's asking those questions. Not only for the young guy to look for a mentor, but for those of us who can be mentors to be open and willing to be that for somebody. Especially with audio, like there is so little that's new. I mean, everything I do is rented. Everything I do came from somebody else. I may do it better than other people or not as well as other people, but EQ is EQ. Compression is compression. Gain structure is gain structure. Like getting those fundamentals right, getting a comprehensive understanding of what they are it's a pretty defined process. In other words, there's not a ton of variables in that. Like either you get it or you don't. And so having somebody that you can go to ask those questions, having resources, there are great resources online. I mean, not just MXU, but there are YouTube resources and people who are trusted who can kind of provide good information. But to have somebody standing beside you at the console with the PA and to be able to go, not this, but this, or have you thought about this? Let's listen to this. Like tools like virtual Soundcheck are invaluable to our industry, and especially to this up and coming generation. It's like, man, to be able to record multi-track audio of your band and go in on a Tuesday when nobody's in the room and solo in place and, figure out, okay, if I take this compressor and just dime it, get my shoulder into it when I turn the knob, what does that do to the sound? Like kind of break it and then put it back together. Yeah. Like,
I'm really glad you said that earlier when I was going to say, and the guitar player gets to go home and practice their parts throughout the week. Right. Like I can't take, my sound system and PA home with me. So yeah, that virtual Soundcheck thing I think is a huge missing piece that a lot of people just don't think it's worth the dollars and cents for when it really is.
Oh, I think it's a must. It's the only way to do anything outside of the heat of the moment of a rehearsal or a sound check or a service. Like to be able to just kind of unpack what's going on when the pressure's off is such a massive tool that we have at our disposal. And most any console that we have nowadays can do that.
Yeah.
So to be able to go in at an off time and just have the PA and go, okay, how can I make this vocal better? How can I make these drums, speak better? What do I need to do in terms of my mix priority to make sure that the vocal doesn't get lost in the rest of the band? How can I make sure the rest of the band is coming around the vocal in a compelling way? How can I use this as a way to learn the songs better? Whatever the case may be, it's like, man, how do I implement effects more effectively? It's like there's a ton of stuff that we can always be working on that, these tools can help with. So let's engage with those, but also have another person there to be able to give feedback and to offer advice and to bounce things off of. It's like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about this vocal, but are you hearing that too? Like, is this just me? How can we make this better? And to collaborate and cooperate as a team so that when we do have multiple people who mix from week to week, that we can all kind of reach that target together. So we can help define for our team, like, hey, here's what we think our sound should be. And so that when, Jerry comes in next week and he's behind the desk, it's pretty similar to what happened last week when Susie was behind the desk, because we're all moving toward the same target.
And being able to take constructive criticism. So it's like,
oh man,
I know from my personal standpoint, there was a lot of people that like I had to stop asking questions from because they were like not giving constructive criticism. Mm-hmm. It was like I had to find those people that I knew were trying to tell me things that needed to be worked on because they knew that I could do it better, and that wasn't the end of the world. And they weren't saying that I sucked. It was just like, yeah, like you could do this, type thought process.
Yeah. I think, how we receive feedback is such a massive thing. I mean, back when I started, sound guys had a reputation of being just curmudgeons. And it was like, this is my area. This is my sandbox. They'd stiff arm everybody and be like, don't talk to me. Like, I'm the one who knows how all this stuff works. I know what all these buttons do. So thanks, but no thanks, and it's like, man, if we're going to get better, we have to let go of that. And so if you're that curmudgeonly old guy, stop it. Be open.
You heard it here first, everyone. Stop it.
Just be open to receiving feedback, because and here's the thing, there's, constructive feedback is a great thing. And that's what we're talking about. But even the sound complaint that comes across from somebody who doesn't really know what they're talking about, like if somebody says it's too loud, or somebody says it felt really harsh, or whatever the case may be, it's like, even if they don't know how to explain what they mean, there's still some truth behind their complaint, and so certain things obviously we take with a grain of salt, but some things, it's like if somebody takes the time to write a complaint, or to send an email, or to talk to a senior leader about something about the sound, it's like there's probably something there. So
we're not talking about the person that complains literally no matter what every single
No, we're not. But if somebody does say, that hurt my ears or whatever, it's like, well, it could be loudness, or it could be tonality.
Yeah.
It could be the sound of the vocal. It could be something about the PA tuning. It could be something about the coverage in the room based on where they were sitting. So be curious. Like, don't be afraid to say, hey, even in an arena, like at a concert, if somebody comes up to me and makes a comment, I'll always ask them where they were sitting, and if they're in an upper bowl in the back corner and the coverage wasn't so great, that is something to pay attention to. If they're down front, right in front of the subs, and they're getting hammered by low end and they can't hear the full range of the PA and only hear the front fill, that's something to consider.
Yeah.
My point is, like, even the random little comments, don't take them as a ding against your character. Don't take it to heart, but do acknowledge, hey, there may be something to this. And then in the case of actually helpful, constructive feedback, I would say we all need to have trusted voices who we can ask, hey, you were sitting, in the middle of the room today. How did everything feel? And ask it in a way that's not just, boy, that mix was pretty great, wasn't it? Because then they're going to say, well, sure. No, but just say, hey, was there anything today that you would have done differently? Or how did the impact of the drum strike you? Or how did the low end feel to you from where you were sitting, or, things that can actually be helpful.
Yeah. I've been trying to get people to like ask more specific questions. Like,
Yeah.
The how did it sound is a great thing, right? Be willing to do that. But like usually when I ask that question, it's because there's something either that I thought was great that I wanted to see if someone else felt like that, or I thought that there was something that kind of wasn't great and I want to be able to make sure it's not just me. Or it's like, oh, there's something I really want to do. Like, hey, like you were sitting in the middle of the room today. Do you feel like if I push the subs a little bit harder, do you think that'd be too much? Because like, I think I'd like to get some more low end, but I don't want to like blow everyone out, type thought process. And I think being like kind of pointed with some of those questions opens people up. And it feels like, I feel like I've gotten better responses from people rather than just pushing the subs and then going, it was really woofy today for some weird reason.
Yeah. Or to go to somebody and say, hey man, I felt like I was really struggling with the female vocal today.
Yeah.
Like, did you feel that too? Or, something like, so I'm working on like the balance of my drums and how the snare drum lands relative to the vocal.
Yeah.
So, and to ask somebody who can actually know what that question means,
right.
To go, did that feel okay to you? Like, how are the balance between the stage left and stage right guitars? Like, is there enough distinctiveness between their tones?
Yeah.
Did you feel like they spoke well? Like, really getting into the nitty gritty with somebody. And not only do you learn, but it's a challenge for them then to be able to respond, because it's like, were they really listening? Like, I think it's cool to be able to kind of challenge each other to go, hey, here's what I'm hearing. What do you think? Yeah. And to go back and forth and be open about it is a great conversation.
Yeah. Talking about how things sit in the mix. I think one of the biggest things that I've been a proponent of is everything we do in church specifically is based off of the spoken word of the pastor or the lyrics of the song, right? Everything else is technically secondary to those things. One of the biggest things that I've seen people struggle with is how do you mix vocals in and get them to sit in the right place? And like, I know that there's obviously like 1,000 different things you could say about that. When you have someone who has been a volunteer, they're not trained, they've been doing it for a long time, and you walk up to them and go, hey, I would do blank, to just kind of like some basic things to help your vocals really sit in that mix well. What would you give that advice? So
one thing that I've found is, some of it has to do with our input list and the way we approach Soundcheck. So most of us have our inputs starting with kick drum, and we work our way down through the band, and then vocals end up in the channel 30 something, let's say. So typical sound check, line check, kick drum. Okay, kick, great. Then we add snare, we add hat, we add toms, we add overheads, we add bass, we add acoustic, we add keys, we add guitars, we add tracks, and now we add a vocal. The problem is, a lot of times that leads to building your mix around the kick drum, because the first thing you hear is kind of what you're trying to sort of use as a foundation. I love the kick drum, but nobody goes home humming the kick drum. So what if we started our sound check, not that we change our input list, but like for me, when I'm checking drums, I want to have the vocal in there if I can. So the worst thing is you build a mix, you have your band feeling right, then you bring in the vocals and the whole mix falls apart because the sound of whatever that vocal mic is hearing in the room wasn't in the rest of your sound check. So first and foremost, like have that mic on while you're checking everything else. But then in terms of the vocal itself, like how can I have the vocal be a part of me building my mix? So I would love to, maybe if the band's on stage, maybe sound check, like get a line check of the vocal first and leave it in as you build the band around it. So instead of building your mix from the kick drum forward, build your mix from the vocal and bring everything else around it. And then in terms of just the mix priority of the vocal, I would say, for sure, I like to have the vocal on top because the lyric is what's primarily being communicated. I'm not talking about like country radio forward. I'm just talking about like a little bit forward. But I don't want to lose the rest of the band. So this is, I mean, the trick is how does the vocal and the electric guitar and the tracks and the keys that all occupy similar space in the frequency spectrum, how do we find a place for all those elements to live and play nice with each other? So some of it can be with panning, some of it can be with level. But I think, to have in your mind, I usually visualize the vocal in Z space. So there's left, right panning, but then there's also front to back sort of perspective.
Yep.
So I want to have the vocal kind of right here with the snare drum right behind it and the band kind of around all of that, because I don't want to not have the support of the instruments around the vocal. I don't want the vocal to sort of happen at the expense of the band. I feel like we have an opportunity to use the band, whether it's the all band DCA or, the band group fader, whatever it is, like the band can really drive and support the vocal. So I don't want to just say vocals loud, everybody else is soft. That's too simplistic. As you get better at mixing, that philosophy needs to change to, yes, the vocal is priority, but how can the band come around the vocal to support it in such a way that it makes it better and makes the band, just the body of the band, more compelling?
Yeah.
And again, that's nuance, and that's a lot of reps, and it's experimentation, and it's virtual sound check. But for sure, I would say for a beginner, have the vocal in the mix from the beginning, so that as you build your mix and sound check, the vocal and its mix priority is always a part of what you're doing, rather than adding the vocals at the end, because chances are you'll have trouble finding a place to put the vocal if you started with just drums, for example.
How do you balance the technical aspect of mixing versus like the creative aspect of mixing? Like where do those two differ, and when does that line get to be changed?
Yeah, that's good. I think it might be different for different people. I think for somebody who approaches the gear as a technician, like super linear, binary, like everything is either on or off. It's, like I know where everything is. I know how all this stuff works. I've got my gains and my faders are at 0, and that's good enough for me. It's like that person needs to really sort of develop some more of a musical sensibility. For the person who is super artistic and highly musical, they probably need to up their technical understanding. But I think, to approach, like for me, like I said earlier, one of the biggest strengths of mine is to be able to approach things as a musician first. And so I am listening for what is the form of the song? Like what's the arc emotionally? What's happening between the verse and the chorus to make the chorus build? Is it a change in vocal range? Is it an addition of an instrument? Is it a change in the drum pattern? Like what is it part-wise that's making the chorus distinctive from the verse? And then the same with the bridge. Are we using the bridge to build, or are we using the bridge as kind of a breakdown? And does it become more intense or less intense when we get to the bridge? Does the bridge build over time? Is it a song that has 3 bridges that's progressively kind of ramping up to the final chorus, which is adding even more energy? So being aware of just those energy changes musically, and then also throughout a worship set, like is there an arc that we're trying to manage emotionally throughout the set, or does every song just feel the same? Like how can we build our worship set in such a way that it actually is building, that it's taking people on a journey? So that is fundamentally understanding the song, like what are the parts, is the band playing the song the same way every time they play it, so that I can understand, like, okay, there's a guitar lick that's in the intro, that's also in the outro, that's also in the turnaround between the first chorus and the second verse. Like, what are those hooks musically that I can ride those faders to sort of bring people's attention to, so that they have sort of musical handles to be able to grab onto this song.
Yeah.
There's always something, whether it's a piano lick, whether it's a guitar lick, whether it's, like coming out of the bridge into the last chorus, there's this hit that the band does where it's like, everybody stops and then hits the downbeat of the chorus. How can I make that moment build so that when they hit that chorus, everybody's like emotionally in a different place than they were before?
Yeah.
So understanding the songs is such a huge component of mixing. It's not just set your faders and stand there. Mixing is an active process.
Yeah.
Not that you're tweak, and you never listen to the music because you're so worried about the knobs. It's like, no, you're using the faders to play the song along with the band. Like, I feel like the console is my instrument, and I get to play the band. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I think to that statement, what a lot of people take that like mixing is physically turning knobs and stuff. What you said, but like a guitar player will tune,
right,
and then play notes, right? So you're not constantly tweaking knobs and stuff like that.
Right.
But like, yeah, the guitar needs a little bit louder here and a little bit quieter at this point, right? The keys need to be, so like you're pushing faders to, make that flow like you're strumming the guitar. You're not tuning while strumming the entire song, right?
Right.
So I think that's what I've seen. A lot of people have a breakdown and like they can't grasp their head. They think they have to be tweaking things constantly because that's what mixing is. And if I'm just sitting there pushing faders, like that's boring and I'm not doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think the knob tweaking is what happens during sound check. It's like I'm changing the tonality. I'm setting compressor. I'm using those tools to be able to sort of shape the tonality of everything. But once we're like running songs, and especially once we're in a show or a service, like I'm just making fader moves, because I feel like everything should be pretty dialed by that point in terms of the sound itself of each input. Then I'm like the recipe has been set, the spices have been added. Now I'm just kind of riding those faders to kind of make those, like the emotional arc of the song, make it happen, to take people on a journey. Yeah, I don't want to fundamentally change the tonality of a guitar or a drum because it's already been established, right? Yeah. Unless somebody breaks a string and something's horribly out of tune or whatever, that's, if there's something to troubleshoot, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, okay, we're set, now I'm just going to play the band. That for me happens through faders.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I've got one more technical question. We've been talking for a while, and I want to keep you all day. I could probably talk to you all day. I mean, I probably have another like 30 questions I could ask you that I've got here. Are arenas acoustically set well? Most of them.
Most arenas are not built for music.
Right.
Most arenas are built for sports, and they're meant to really facilitate cheering of crowds and to be noisy.
Right.
They're meant to be reverberant places for fans to express their love for a sports team.
Right. So I asked that question because I get into this argument with people all the time. And my question is, how do you handle mixing in acoustically challenged rooms like gyms and reverberant spaces? Because let's face it, a lot of churches are either church plants, they're in a school gym, or they're just in a giant, solid, hard surface room. A lot of them have polished concrete things, right? And they go to your Passion Conference or a Chris Tomlin show in an arena and they go, that sounded amazing. Oh, well, it's an arena show. Everything is perfect for a PA like that. And it's like, no, you really don't really truly understand what's happening there. So my question is like, how do you handle mixing in that? What would you make suggestions to the people that see those arena shows and think it sounds great?
Yeah.
And knowing that you technically deal with the same kind of issues that they might be dealing with on a smaller scale.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think there's a difference between an arena and a middle school gym.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, the air volume in the space itself does accommodate some of the acoustical challenges. I mean, typically in an arena, like you have the reverberation, but you don't necessarily have the same kind of reflections as you would have to deal with in a gymatorium. So if you are in a portable setup, or if you're, one of the worst things that I've seen over the last 10 years or so is churches who build a new building and they are over budget because somebody forgot to account for having to pave the parking lot. And so the first thing they cut is the acoustics budget for the auditorium. So it's like, we had a plan for making this space acoustically reasonable, and now we can't do acoustics, but we still want to do our big PA. It's like, well, your room shape, room design, acoustics, I would argue, is actually just as important as the size of your PA. Most people, when they get into that scenario, they'll just try to overwhelm the room with more PA. So it's like, well, let's just add more speakers and make it so that we kind of, like I said, overwhelm the fallacies in the room. It's like, man, I hope we can work with architects and designers that can take acoustics into account, because it really does make a difference. So that fundamentally, that's just an overall statement to integrators and designers. It's like, don't forget about acoustics because it matters. But in terms of like how to mitigate some problems, it's, a lot of it is dependent on the specifics of the scenario. Like smaller rooms, I mean, I think you need to have vision for the band to be able to play to the room. So it could be that, we don't have, our sort of smash and bash drum kit that the drummer's just allowed to play however he wants. Maybe they do need to use darker cymbals. Maybe they need to feather their technique so that the cymbals are just quieter. Maybe they use a more broken down kit. Maybe they use rods or blastics instead of sticks. There are certain things we can do to kind of help tone things down. But as far as like reflections and, real problems in a space, man, it's tough. Like, I mean, it's hard without knowing specifics. But
Yeah.
I would say, for sure, like if you can sort of streamline your content to fit the context. So in other words, if you're a small team of volunteers in a cafetorium in a borrowed school, setting up and tearing down every week, leadership needs to understand that you're not going to be able to sound like Passion or Elevation or Hillsong because you just don't have the tools that those folks have. So yeah, you can sing the song, but maybe try to deliver a song in a way that's appropriate to your context. So maybe it's more broken down, maybe it's more acoustic, maybe it's, just
more controlled.
More controlled. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to be able to, talk to the team about how to play to the space is a big deal.
You're not going to be able to play through an electric guitar amp. Sorry.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the great thing is technology has brought us really great tools. We have amp modelers that do an incredible job of replicating those kind of tonalities. We have even electronic drums have come a long way in terms of the quality of the samples and how we're able to deliver a really convincing Memorex version of a live drum kit.
Yeah, and I think on the electric guitar side of things, the great thing is like a lot of these bigger worship bands have kind of jumped in and said, "Hey, we'll design our own patches so that like when you're playing our song, like you don't have to try and figure out how to make your guitar sound like mine. Like we'll kind of like do it for you."
Yeah,
which is going great.
And just know, like for people who are questioning that, a lot of those bands have moved to virtual. Like a lot of them are using some of those modelers instead of amps, not only because of stage volume, but just because of convenience and wear and tear and, riding down the road in a bus trailer is not great for a guitar amp. So you show up to Soundcheck and you have to, work on your amp every day because it got banged up in the truck. It's like, is that better? Or should we just use a modeler with those same sounds in it? And it's more reliable, more durable. You can fly with it. It's like, put it in your backpack and it's done.
It's easier to bring a modeler into your hotel room and,
Totally. Especially because those sounds have gotten so much better over the years. And like you said, a lot of those artists have uploaded their patches per song that they use for their stuff. So why not? Hey, if I want to sound like so-and-so, let me just use their tone. That's a good place to start.
Yeah. Well, dude, I got 2 questions for you and then I'll let you go. We've been on here for a long time. So, one, how are you feeling about the new Waves console?
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The LV1 Classic is Waves' new console. They've taken all that was great about the LV1 modular system and put it inside a small enclosure. So it's an all-in-one deal. You don't have to Frankenstein a bunch of components together anymore. It includes a really powerful server for plugins and processing, as well as exceptional I/O. The I/O is based on the Ionic hardware from Waves, which is a great preamp, super high resolution, super low noise floor, 16 inputs, 12 outputs built into the desk, tons of networking. We have it at my church. We actually got one of the first 12 that shipped around the world, and it has been awesome. Our volunteers love it, and I can't say enough good things about it.
That's great. If you were to give one piece of advice, it doesn't have to be AV related. It could be personal, could be spiritual. What would you tell our audience right now?
Oh man. One piece. There's a lot.
I like to put people on the spot for this because then it's like it feels a little bit more heartfelt because you kind of have to think through it a little bit.
Yeah, I would say to the band on stage, tune your guitar. To the guy standing behind the desk, turn up the toms. And to the vocalist on stage, mic technique matters. And then from the personal, spiritual, relational side, get to know your band, get to know your team, cast vision for the fact that we're all one team. We're not a worship team and a production team. We're actually one team who's tasked with together creating an environment where people can experience what God has for them and take a step in their faith every week. So how can we partner with the production folks and the stage folks to facilitate that in the most compelling way? And don't be afraid to have those conversations, because that conversation can be difficult, but it's so, so vital to what we do.
That's actually really great advice all through. So I appreciate that.
It's not one piece, it's several pieces, but that's okay.
They all kind of flow together in one thing. So it's the same kind of thought process. So it's good. But Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to reach out to you and find you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at MXU Jeff, and my email is jeff@getmxu.com. I'd be glad to connect with people and connect more. So yeah.
Great.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Do you do consulting and stuff like that if people want to reach
Sure.
out to that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to come and check out what you're doing and hang out with your team and talk about mixing or team stuff or anything in between. So yeah, feel free to reach out. That'd be great.
Sweet. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and we really appreciate it. And
it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow, I hope that was as inspiring to you as it was for me. Really do take advantage of reaching out to Jeff if you have something that you're just trying to figure out or you want to be able to enhance what you are doing. He's a really down-to-earth guy and really will respond to you. I would also really suggest you subscribing to MXU. There's tons of tools on there that I know will really help you in your house of worship mixing. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe for more inspirational content here. And until next time, I'm Justin. Keep on enhancing.